Bene, bentrovati. Buon pomeriggio. Come state?
Welcome, good afternoon, how are you?
Saluto voi che siete qui presenti.
Hey.
Saluto
Let
chi
me welcome the people who are
condivide.
here in attendance and anyone who is sharing the evening with from far away. We'll have the same wines for tasting, so we'll be separate, but we'll be enjoying the same wines. This will be a stroll across some very well known territories in Italy, while others might be less well known gems that deserve being discovered and understood more depth, seen from close up.
Dal nord. Partiamo il nostro
Let's
viaggio
start from the north. How would we open in the most classic way a dinner? We're going to explore the terroir of Prosecco, territory of Prosecco, and we're tasting a Prosecco Superiore in the area of Asolo, one of the most ancient areas with Conegliano and Valdobbiadene for Prosecco production. This is a wonderful area of steep, rolling hills, green hills, geologically a very interesting area. Area that is the result of the outcome of a marine bed, as many often in Italy are very often are land emerged from the sea, so that is an extremely complex patchwork of vineyards. This is the area of the Asolo Hills in eastern Veneto, rolling hills where olive groves and vineyards coexist peacefully and have been doing so for the millennia, because the history of viticulture here dates back a long way. The company we're going to taste is extremely young.
Stiamo parlando di no, è partito, scusate, eccola. Stiamo parlando di Bresolin.
So we're talking about Bresolin, a company that was established in 2012, an extremely modern and dynamic company. Two brothers, David and Enrico, a third who's younger, Matteo, joined forces and have recovered vineyards where the vineyards had been lost. So they recovered old vineyards in this extremely complicated area. These are the steepest hills of the Colli Asolani, so it means working manually on steep slopes with no mechanization whatsoever. So a lot of work and a lot of toil. They accepted the challenge and decided to undertake development in viticulture. When we are talking about Asolo, the varietal in is Glera. Up until recently, Glera was known as Prosecco grape. What happened then? When did it become a Glera? Well, everything happened in 2009 when the area of Prosecco, Asolo and Conegliano Valdobbiadene, became a DOCG. So they reached the tip of the quality pyramid at the national level, and the problem just cropped up. I know that if I plant Chardonnay wherever I am in the world, I can call my wine Chardonnay, obviously, because that is the grape metal from which I obtained my wine. So if my grapes are called Prosecco wherever I am growing Prosecco, I can call my wine Prosecco. So that was conducive to a problem, because Prosecco was starting to become very well known internationally. And so on the market, we're starting to see Chinese Proseccos, New Zealand Proseccos, because if you plant Prosecco grape, you can call your wine Prosecco. But that was creating confusion, because talk about Prosecco, you're talking about a well-defined geographical area. It was therefore necessary to recover the very old name of this varietal and change the name of Prosecco grapes back to Glera. So anyone who is growing the variety around the world can call the wine Glera, but not Prosecco. So how come we can still call it Prosecco? It's a strategy, a geographical strategy. Probably the Prosecco grape originally came from a village, very small village on the border between the Italian and Slovenian coast by the name of Prosecco. So the designation is expanded in order to include a small village and have advanced geographical that would justify the use of the name. So today the grapes Prosecco are called Glera, and the Prosecco has territorial ties to a specific village, so no one can call the same one Prosecco elsewhere in the world. Glera is an explosive varietal, semi-aromatic with a lot of terpenes, a lot of aromas, and then the other characteristic is that it's extremely acidic. So it's an excellent basis, it's an excellent base wine for a spumante, for a sparkling wine. You need a very acidic grape variety, and Glera combines both elements, especially suited for Charma spumantes. Will underscore the olfactory explosiveness and then benefit from the acidic base of the grapes. Taste a Prosecco Superiore of the Asolani. It's an extra dry, and therefore let's imagine residual sugar levels that are very present, that will not sweeten the wine, make it smoother. And sweetness and smoothness will be used in different contexts. It's a Charma method, as the modern tradition of Prosecco will have it. The ancient tradition of Prosecco involved an ancestral method. Half of the process would happen in stainless steel, half would be spent in the bottle, so the wine would be bottled with all the yeast, the wine was unfiltered, and many are recovering that particular process. But in most cases, when you talk about Prosecco, most of the Prosecco is a Charma. Let's start from the first one. Let's look at this Prosecco. This is the typical color of this grape variety. This very delicate straw yellow with these almost greenish highlights. And then the foam, these subtle and delicate beads that light up the glass. Let's put in the glass. The aromatic load of Prosecco is absolutely at the forefront of the wine, and rediscover the classic aromas of these grapes that are associated with the varietal plants, the fruit, actually the pears. In case, ripe pears are at the core of this wine's bouquet. And then you have a floral component, like a sensation of a very rose and a drop of wisteria. And then it close on the varietal nuances, sage in particular. Prosecco's bouquet is simple. You can't expect lots of aromas. You have to understand that its characteristic is to have very distinctive, very predictable aroma. See if the palate corresponds to that.
Sentite la estremamente cremosa.
Also very creamy to the and very enveloping, and clearly enough, as we were saying at the beginning, this generous sip is such because of the residual sugar. When we're talking about extra dry wine, the residual sugar is above 17 grams of sugar per liter, which in itself is not little. If you try to dissolve 17 grams of sugar in 1 water, it will taste sweet. It will not taste sweet here because we have the acidic components of the Glera. So there's a perfect balance between the enveloping sugar and the acidity that perfect cleanses the palate. And in the persistence, you find a lot of a bit green finish of aromatic of pot herbs. This is a straightforward wine that must be bottled today and consumed tomorrow. So it's a good opening for array. You can combine it with an appetizer, a light seafood dish, or a salad, or why not with a frittata with aromatic herbs. So aromatic and light dishes that will go well with the delicate and gentle of Prosecco. And after opening our tasting with the most traditional of opening wines, of starter wines, we'll continue our journey in the world of white wines to enter a different area.
Un'altra? Grazie. E andiamo nella zona di Roma, cioè andiamo nel Lazio, quindi
so we're to Latium, near Rome.
Proprio ai castelli romani.
This is the Castelli Romani, to the east of Rome, just outside Rome, really. This is a very special area because the Castelli Romani resulted from the collapse of a volcano. This is an amphitheater of pure volcanic. As the crow flies, we're 50 kilometers from the sea, we're exposed to the east, so the sea breezes will get into the vineyards. And this mixture of highly mineral soils and the sea winds is creating a very interesting situation for viticulture.
State muovendo voi o sto muovendo io? Ok, dovevo tornare indietro di una, grazie. Eccola qua. Ci siamo, andiamo ai castelli. Vito Miceli trova
Vito Miceli covered this corner of paradise. The parent company is in San Leo. This one is Villa Germana, and it's like a division of the big San Leo estate. So this is on the Castelli Romani amphitheater, this extremely thin soils. The company started its project in 2018, and they began with a lot of attention to focus on the surrounding environment. So agricultural practices are integrated and tend to organic grade with as few interventions as possible. Here we find one of the most traditional grape varieties of Latium, Malvasia of Latium, also known as potted Malvasia, the Malvasia puntinata. Of course, Malvasia is a big family of aromatic varietals. Malvasia puntinata, or spotted Malvasia, it stands out because of its aromatic content. At some point in the Romani, it had been completely abandoned in favor of the white Malvasia of Candia, which is less sinful, but more productive, less sensitive, and easier to cultivate. So after the phylloxera hit, many decided to replace Malvasia di Candia instead of Malvasia puntinata. Puntinata is a lot more interesting, and luckily enough, in recent the varietal was recovered and it's now fully part of the area and the vines in the Castelli Romani. Wine, the Commodo, is defining its traits. So this is 100% Malvasia puntinata, a wine that undergoes pre-fermentation maceration, so skin contact, some sort of cold maceration on the skins to distill all possible aromas that Malvasia can yield, and then classical fermentation, and then a few months in the bottle. Actually, Malvasia puntinata works well in stainless steel, while oak can sort of limit and constrain its explosive bouquet. Let's see if we can discover the bouquet in our glass. The explosiveness of aromatic varietal stands out. The immediate sensation is not just roses, it's rose water. It's like an infusion of pink rose petals, a very strong sensation that then veers to a yellow rose, a bit more intense than camel and mimosa. And then you discover these mineral tones, and here it is the terroir that's out of these volcanic soils that is reminiscent of just a bit graphite. Is fruity, very elegant fruit, tropical fruit, pineapple, some papaya, and then passion fruit, which is between tropical fruit aromas and citrus fruit aromas, like a sweet citrus fruit. And then the last touch is spices, some ginger, some white pepper that includes this very vivid nose that is compelling. Let's see how the wine performs on the palate.
Sentite come il primo approccio ci illude.
Now, the first approach is delusory because it first feels like a soft, smooth, and wine. Glycerin is the first that reaches the palate, but it is soon overtaken by the acidity and the saltiness of the wine, the sapidity of the wine. It's just a fight between all these elements, despite the smooth impact with a lot of tropical fruit on the palate, and towards the end you can detect the floral components a lot, and the rosewater is motive. The really surprising gustatory characterization is fresh and components. Immediate acidity that again is a scent of citrus fruit and a passion fruit, and then the salty finish that comes from the terroir, volcanic soils, the sea breezes. So this wine combines very successfully the variety that Malvasia holds itself with the territorial characteristics, the volcanic soil and the sea close to the volcano. Now, in terms of pairings, we can, just entertain ourselves because it's a wine that lends itself to pairings with spiced dishes. From maybe an excellent option. The gustatory intensity of the wine can up to the aromatic characteristics of saffron, but also it can stand the presence of butter in the risotto, the aromatics. Or you can imagine it in pairing with fish, white fish. In this case, it has to be richer fish. It could be Mediterranean small fish, pasta with the pilchard. Gustatory riches that goes well with savory dishes. So a gastronomic wine. Let's move north again. We're going to an ancient, very ancient area when it comes to viticulture, Emilia-Romagna. Although talking about Emilia-Romagna is a mistake, we should be speaking of the two components separately, Emilia and Romagna, because the two terroirs are very different, the soil, the climate, the traditions, the varietals. One particular varietal, which especially in the Romagna is standing out because of its qualities, and we're talking about the Albana. So we're going to Albana from Romagna. This area again is close to the sea, and the winery that we're going to taste is called Tre Monti. We're lucky to have him here, and he can tell us more about the history of the winery and their project as a whole.
In italiano, vero? Sì, certo. Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being present with us. Just a few words about our winery and our wine. My company was established in the 1960s by my parents, 20 hectares. Now we have 2 hectares between Imola and Italy on the hills. In total 50 hectares that we run directly without buying grapes or wine from others. All our vineyards are cultivated according to the organic viticulture rulebook. We produce the classical wines, Sangiovese and Alban. Alban is very dear to us. It was the first to be DOCG status in 1987. grapes that are not easy to process, a very delicate wine in the cellar, especially when dry. And that's something that's very dear to us. The bunches are beautiful. Seeing them firsthand is very impactful. The color is a gold yellow, and that is the reference color that we work on our ideal palette to then transfer the same to the glass. Very quickly, I would like to give you some details about the wine to taste. Vitalba, it's a DOCG Dry Albana 2021. Its characteristic is that it is our experiment with Georgian amphora maceration, together with other Romagna colleagues who are also friends. Out of curiosity, we started in 2009 also the recommendations and advice of our Georgian friends. We started using their vinification technique. We used original Krevris, that is the Georgian amphorae, and we picked the grapes having reached a perfect maturity, and the whole bunches were left in the amphora for very long by our standards. This is customary in Georgia. Keep their macerations going for years. Even in our specific case, we started with 4-month maceration in the amphora, then reduced in recent years to only 3 months. Our goal is not to imitate more famous prominent wines, but to use this ancient, which is, however, new to us, as a new tool to exalt the characteristics of the varietal. What we were intrigued by, more than anything else in working with the Chevre, the amphora, is that this type of container is absolutely neutral, and it will leave the varietal characteristics and terroir characteristics intact, while concentrating and accelerating the maturation of the wine. So this seems to be a wonderful option, a wonderful approach, very encouraging, very compelling to deal with the note of our Romagna whites. So my recommendation is to warm up the wine a little between your hands.
Non interrate.
So the amphorae are not buried in the ground. They are around. So warm up the wine in the glass because we deal with it as if it were a white, but actually it's not. And it's not even a red, it's an orange wine with its specific characteristics. This wine should be served as if it were a red. So wait some time, warm it up in your hands because a lot of aromas will be released. This will express its soul and nature much better. Start with the observation. The color is a real orange. It's a copper color that is very intense visually. It is incredibly brilliant. As we were told, amphorae are a very interesting implement because it will not yield any but just like wood, it will allow micro-oxygenation, so the wine will undergo some level of evolution. And also the long maceration on the skins will allow maximum extraction of what grapes have to offer, and the nose of this wine is very special. Initially, it may think of candied fruit, like a candied orange peel, dehydrated apricots, and then you detect very interesting hues that are reminiscent of salt crystals of fish tastes, and almost rocks on the sea cliffs, and then floral sensations. This is almost a wilted flower, a potpourri of a mixture of yellow dried flowers. And it moves on to very special nuances. There's a wonderful balsamic blend of mint and licorice. The licorice is very clear-cut. It's a licorice root. It's a wine that is reminiscent of the dirt that goes back to the clay sensations that are reminiscent of the amphora. And then a mixture of spices like curry with a bit of saffron towards the end. And then it will wander on very special nuances such as wheat, something reminiscent of Weissbier, white beer. I wouldn't know how to describe that better. It's harder to describe these wines because, luckily enough, they depart completely from the canon's typical classical standardized description. This is a very interesting universe.
Vi faccio una domanda.
I'm asking you a question. Is this what you expected?
Allora, in bocca gli orange wine sono divisivi per lui.
Well, orange wines are divisive, to say the least.
Personale. Qui però è un vino che veramente riesce
But this
a
wine
trovare un suo equilibrio.
really manages to strike an interesting balance. And the real special thing about this wine is that, well, the attack is very consistent with the olfaction. So it is much in line with these dried flowers and ripe fruit of the bouquet. But then the citrus sensation becomes explosive on the palate. And the thing that really strikes us and that leaves the people who taste it for the first time, taste an orange wine, is that here the wine is not, properly speaking, tannin, but a maceration of 4 months has a tannic level that is different from a red wine, but it is astringent. Towards the finish, the wheat-like, the grain-like sensation will close up on a persistence that is long and very thin. Now imagine this wine in a pairing. This is not a wine for fish dishes. This is a wine for meat dishes. Imagine it on tagliatelle, white or with roasted pork or stewed rabbit. White meat that is oily and moist. With this wine, it would cleanse the palate, so we can play around at the table and entertain ourselves with this wine. This it also helps us transition from the initial whites to the reds that are here to come. Moving to Lombardy, in one corner, a very special corner of this region, Gianni Brera, the wine expert, to say that the Oltrepo Pavese has of a bunch, and that is not by chance because it's perfectly suited of growing vines. It is a corner of Lombardia on the border with Emilia-Romagna and Liguria. This is a a blessed area. It's a hilly area
Che poi arriverà fino all'arco alpino da scavalcare per entrare in Liguria, ma
at borders on the mountains towards Liguria, but the sun breezes from Liguria get over the mountains and bless these vineyards. The microclimate here, therefore, is very special. So agriculture is historical here. It's a very ancient area of grape growing. And the wine tells us about that. Mr. Tor is here with us. Mrs. is here with us to tell us more about her wine. My name is Patrizia Torti, and I feel emotional about the opportunity to tell you about my wine. Monte Carlo is one of the 5 most important municipalities for Pinot Nero in Italy, so Monte Carlo Versigia. Pinot Nero is a varietal that requires manual work. Ours is a family estate that is run by women. Our father introduced us to the farm work and encouraged us to discover more about our vineyards and about the new technologies, traditions and technologies. Why? And we discovered that one of the hills was named Burgundy, Borgogna in Italian. You know that women have a very feminine curiosity, and so we discovered that a group of French people after World War I had settled and renamed the hill. We discovered that this hill is excavated. There are tunnels that keep the freshness close to the roots while draining excess water. The company, the estate was established in 1910. We're the 4th generation, and we look at the future based on the lessons of the past. And I hope you'll have a chance to visit us because we pick our grapes by hand. Every day is a new emotion, as you can tell from my voice, and I'll leave the floor to the moderator. Thank you very much. What vintage is this one? 2018. It's 100% Pinot Nero or Pinot Noir. It's hard to talk about Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is an varietal, truly eclectic, that has a capacity to change its nature in a surprising fashion. You need to meet the needs of Pinot Nero because it's very demanding. It's not going to help you. You need to take very special care of Pinot Nero. This is 100% Pinot Nero. The vintage year is 2018. Next slide, please. And in the glass, you will recognize the typicity of Pinot Nero based on the color. You can't expect a very concentrated wine and not a dark wine. So it's like a very lightweight, a transparent one like Thule. And this is a ruby red color with this slightly reddish and orangey edge. Pinot Noir is a tantalizing grape variety. It tiptoes into your nose and then it explodes. So initially it's a delicate, a very gentle nose that speaks to flowers, dog roses, wild roses, and then small red fruit, raspberries, still crisp, red currant, wild strawberry, and then it yields these earthy tones, as if you were detecting the odor of roots and hues. This is departing from licorice and it's closer to urban gentian roots or cinchona. It's a nose that manages to be aerial and at the same time subterranean. It combines these two worlds and it interprets them with a lot of grace and elegance in the glass. Let's take a sip.
Anche in bocca ci mantiene, diciamo, questa sua classe proprio. Pinot Nero è una ballerina anche gustativamente.
So it's a classic taste. Pinot Noir is like it comes on tiptoe, but then it can touch all the points of your palate like a big wheel. Tannins are very subtle, caressing tannins that simply caress the gums. It's intense, but the floral part and the fruit make the heart at the center of the taste. Towards the finish, darker emerge and they cover up the initial smooth and fruity message of the beginning. Just like on the nose, it described two different worlds, finding a connection between the two. The same happens on the palate. It becomes assertive with a nice persistence and a long finish with a return to the rhubarb root and quinchot. This is a wine that needs to be addressed very carefully in terms of pairings. I think this type of Pinot Noir that is so suave, so subtle, so elegant, it's very delicate aroma with its aromatic components like lamb chops. Or if we're looking for more structured dishes, it could be dishes with mushrooms as in, because it would work very well with the mushrooms without bringing the bitterness of the mushrooms that can emerge if the pairing is not correct. It is elegant, just like and it's a chic wine, a wine that has a very chic soul, Pinot Nero. Let's continue our journey, discovering the rest of Italy. We're now visiting one of the historic and historical terroir of Italian wine. Tuscany is part of the legend of our country. When you tell about Ghana, there are many terroirs that can tell out what's special about this region. The wine that we're tasting now comes from a fascinating area, the area of the Nobile di Montepulciano, around the municipality of Montepulciano, to the southeast of the region. If you imagine the typical postcard of Tuscany with the rolling hills that are all green, well, this is the panorama you will see from the terrace of the town of Montepulciano. We're at the heart between the Valley and the Chiana, where the hills look like waves because of the gentle appearance. This is a very special. This is inland, but like many other areas in our country, penetrated of the continent and deeply. The inner part of Tuscany, in fact, is characterized by marl, that is soils that are the outcome of a mix between lime and clay. In this case, there are also marine sediments with fossils that will impart special nuance to the wines whose grapes grow here. And we talk about Tuscany, essentially it's about Sangiovese, because that is the varietal that is most representative of the region. This is a land colonized by Sangiovese. The winery is called the I Cipressi, the cypresses that punctuate the Tuscan countryside with the big alleys of cypresses that the poet Carducci will celebrate in his poems. This is really reminiscent of the landscape you see from the estate. So, the press is run by a family that was originally from Campania, moved to the area of Montepulciano, found about this area and took over 6.5 hectares, so not huge. And they are growing Sangiovese to make Nobile di Montepulciano. They renovated the cellars, took an organic approach, and they chose to use big casks instead of barriques to welcome complicated and edgy varietal as Sangiovese, most spread varietal of Italy. But every time the area changes, the style, the identity, the bouquet will you talk about Sangiovese, you can make reference to major families. There are many biotypes of Sangiovese, but the two macro areas were the two big families of Sangiovese are Sangiovese grosso and Sangiovese piccolo. And that is misleading because the Sangiovese grosso is the smaller of the two, because bear is very small, the skin is very thick. So when it's pressed, a certain amount of must will be obtained, and in the maceration, the skin to must proportion is in favor of the skin. So the extraction will be much more than the other Sangiovese. So a lot of must. While in the case of the other Sangiovese, the concentration will be different. So if you think of the big terroir, such as Nobile Montepulciano, Brunello di Montepulciano, and Chianti Classico, you make reference all the time to Sangiovese grosso, not to Sangiovese piccolo, and especially the biotype associated with Montalcino is the Prugnolo Gentile, and this tells us about the style. Sorry, not Montalcino. That tells a lot about the Nobile di Montepulciano. Sangiovese is a difficult grape; it's rich in tannins, and the Prugnolo Gentile is a slightly gentler version, although gentle is not applicable to any Sangiovese, especially when younger. But its harshness, its tannins are also its long life elixir. If it didn't have this acidity, Sangiovese would not aspire to continue to grow for infinite years, as is the case in many instances. What we are going to taste is a Sangiovese grosso, Nobile di Montepulciano traditional processing. This is a company choice. Now in Tuscany, barriques are everywhere, but if you think of the traditional style of Sangiovese, it is large casks that tend to prevail. The Montalcino and Chianti producers of old used to use the large casks. Then barriques became a way to somehow accelerate this very painstaking development of Sangiovese. And very often today you work as a blend with a blend of big oak and small oak, 50 to 30 hectoliters especially. And then after approximately 36 months in the large casks, it is left to sell 6 months in bottles to readapt and to rebalance. How long is a Nobile di Montepulciano going to last? It all depends on a number of factors, the vintage year, the producer. It's something that you can leave 10, 15 years in your cellar, forget about it, and then have a look at what has happened in the meanwhile, and discover wines that are still very drinkable and very dynamic. Sangiovese, like a Pinot Nero, is not very colorful. Sangiovese wines are never too dark, and tend to be pretty transparent. It will very easily develop garnet highlights. It's harder for it to preserve its color, but it's very fascinating. Let's see how it is addressing those. The vintage year is 18.
Sentite, qui troviamo una delle caratteristiche classiche in comune verso
So here is a classic characteristic, which is the balsamic sensation, this immediate nose of eucalyptus, which is very representative of this varietal. And then it brings out a characteristic which is not so typical of Sangiovese, but of Prugnolo Gentile, the floral part. Sangiovese also contains some floral elements, generally violets. In the Prugnolo Gentile, and hence di Montepulciano, this is magnified. Together with Let's say you have roses and a hint of geraniums initially, and almost wisteria. There's a nose where the floral components are absolutely explosive. And then it brings out these very elegant aromas. The oak here did not leave sensations. No rosé, no fumé, no smoky hints, but very elegant sensations of aromatic wood, cedar wood with tobacco, the cigar boxes, sandalwood, aromatic and scentful wood, different from the toasted notes of cask oak. Sangiovese is balsamic initially, but then it takes us to the forest and shows its undergrowth tones with scents of moist, of drenched soil. The barks, the resin, the balsamic sensations of bark, ferns, and moss. And some mushrooms, which during evolution will turn into something close to truffles, and then this faux rouge of iron. This almost rusty sensation, blood-like, the idea of a tartar of raw meat. A deep nose, once again, it is extremely dense. It's a nice orchestra on the nose. Let's see if all these promises are kept also on the
È lui. Lo sentite il tannino? La prima cosa che arriva.
So the first thing that you discover is tannin with these edgy tannins that are biting the palate. So it's 2018, it's a young boy, it's a teenager. So just like any teenager, it's pissed off. And this is normal at this stage of its evolution. But the dehydration caused by tannins is balanced by the acidity. Think of quinoa, of bergamot, and a lot of undergrowth. But towards the finish, you have this sensation of sandalwood, aromatic woods, and tobacco that closes the sip on a very deep tone. This is a wine just at the beginning of its evolution. So today, what we need to do when faced with such a wine is to imagine its evolution primarily. This is a wine that will further expand its olfactory bouquet, where the tannin is going to become smoother, more soluble, and the acidity will dissolve the edges, and the persistence will become even more satisfactory. So we're tasting, hoping to have an opportunity to open the same bottle in 7 to 8 years to see what has happened in the meanwhile, to see how the wine will have changed. The change will be dramatic. Entering a totally different area, we're going to meet another the great varietals of Italy. This is Campania. What we think of Campania, the area of Naples, is the sun, the sea, the coastline, the holidays, but actually what we're talking about is a very different area of Campania. This is the cold part of the region. We need to climb the highest, the tallest mountains in this region, because we're going to the region known as the Beneventano, the area of Benevento, where the territory completely changes of the coastline. Forget about it. It's cold in winter. And summers are hot, but never scorching. It's an area very rich in water. And so the bodies of water bring about some freshness, especially to the soil. And the soil is very interesting because originally a clay soil, but this part of Campania is one that geologically underwent very violent changes across the various geological ages. So below the clay, There's a very rocky part, rocky layers run deep in the ground with lime in it. These vineyards are very impressive. Observing one vineyard from above is like looking at a painting with different textures in the ground. You find very thin strips with sand, areas where you have pebbles, areas where the soil is red because of the presence of iron, others that are whiter because of the level of lime. So a varietal like Aglianico, which is the prevalent vine here, can express different varieties as part of the same area. And this is something magical that happens in only few Italian areas. The winery that we're going to taste from here is historical. It's called Fontana Vecchia. And here again, I would like someone who's not me to tell us more about the winery, please.
Grazie a voi, grazie a Coldiretti per questa opportunità. Sul territorio è inutile dire altro perché
Thank you very much. Not much else can be added about the terroir because, as usual, Sara knows better than those who live there. Fontana Vecchia, the winery. We've been there producing wines since 1870. Producing grapes, but we only began 30 years ago bottling our wines since I took over in the company, and we aimed for maximum typicity, and we've always made, and that was an initial choice, to only make 100% pure wines. The wine you're going to taste is one that we've produced ever since 1994, and it takes the name of the vineyard because the area is called Cataratte, that's why it's called Vigna Cataratte. And it's one of the wines that has received the most awards and recognitions by professional wine tasters and guide writers. It's always recognized because of its quality and its ability to represent our terroir. And a few years back, it yielded other recognitions not only to the wine, but also for the benefit of the wine that was recognized as being typical of the area. So this wine has always been a source of satisfaction in our production, and it is historical. It's a vineyard of Aglianico that is approximately 24-25 years old. There not many vineyards that are older than that because the viticulture in our area was done using different training methods, and we transitioned to the Espaliers 30 years. So all the vineyards are relatively new. So Aglianico is one of the most important grape in the south. It's found in Basilicata in the Irpinia region, sub-region, and it's indisputably important for South Italy. I'll stop here. Enjoy.
Versione bianca, no? Che poi, nel senso, anche sulla falanghina bisognerebbe spendere due parole.
Falanghina. We should spend a couple of words on Falanghina. We're accustomed to the coastal Falanghina, but the land Falanghina is completely different, is a completely different animal. So it's worth going to the place to taste it again. Back to Aglianico. Aglianico is a great varietal. At some point in southern Italy, they started working with Aglianicos that were very powerful, that took long agings. The ones in the north, the people from the Barolo area said, well done, you've made the South Barolo. From the south, they replied, you probably are making the northern Aglianico instead. So the truth is that we're talking about another great traits of Italy. When you talk about longevity, power, and structure. Aglianico is on the podium of Italy's spreads. There are different areas where Aglianico is grown. In the area of Benevento, where there's more clay, with these more welcoming version. While in the area of Irpinia, of Taurasi, where the soil is very rich in volcanic boulders, Aglianico is more acute, more profound, dark, incredibly tannic. The other version is the one of the Vulture on the slopes of the volcano, where Aglianico is more elegant, gentle, less imposing. So, same varietal, different terroirs, different versions. Today we're going to taste Vigna Catarratti, pure Aglianico, 18 months in barriques. And this use of oak was absolutely necessary. Aglianico is one of the varietals that goes along with oak and actually needs. Otherwise, the tannins of Aglianico would be very hard to drink when the wine is young. So the color is very thick, very intense, a ruby red that is deep and brilliant at the same time. Do you know if you've already taken in the fragrance of the wine? I can describe this note as dense. It reminds me of ink, of black ink. The fruit is black, brambles, and then sensations of cinchona, what the French are calling goudron, tar. So down deep, there's tar and hydrocarbons as a fat. And then comes the black cherry in spirit with the oak coming back with the boisé, woody and smoky notes. Oaky, and then balsamic, menthol instead of eucalyptus, so very powerfully balsamic. These slightly ethereal sensations are reminiscent of beeswax and furniture wax. A floral bouquet, which is very fascinating, dried flowers, red roses that have remained have spent some extra time on the table and that we were reluctant to throw away. And then licorice, but this is not the root of the licorice. Licorice, it's like a licorice candy. A bay, juniper, rosemary too, dried.
Agrumata quasi alla fine.
And a citrusy note towards the finish.
Quasi del chinotto.
And the chinotto.
La carruba.
Carobs. It's an olfactory universe, and here Aglianico really is a comfortable wine to drink. Okay, let's learn more by sipping it.
Sentite come cambia volto.
So it's totally different to the palate. And this is a non-typical element in aging wine. There's a time in their lives when olfactory they've already found dimension. They have stretched out, have themselves comfortable. They've found their expression, while to the palate it's still very young. The tannins are perfectly aligned, very orderly. The tannin mesh is very orderly, but it's very aggressive. The acidity still needs to find its perfect place in the sip, but it makes it juicy, thus rebalancing the dehydration caused by tannins. So This one is still at the beginning of its evolution, but you can already detect the matter in the sip. It's a sip that is chewable because of the thickness of the texture that tells us about the evolution that this wine still has in front of it. This is truly the beginning of its journey. I would taste it not in 6 or 5 years, but in 15 years, because really in 15 years, this wine has found its final expression, a very interesting one, I expect. So if I have to think of it in a pairing, we should start cooking now for tomorrow, because this requires long cooking times. Meat stews, roasted dishes baked that are baked in the oven, and this is a heavy weight on the table, and so we needed to accompany it by choosing heavy weights in the dish. In a few years, not today, but in a few years now, this wine will be a perfect match also for aged cheeses. Today, the tannic components are still too aggressive to work well with aged cheeses, but in a few years, when these overturns are it will work well with long-aged cheeses, very tasty, very persistent. So it's a wine that needs to be tasted again and again to see how it evolves in the course of time. And to finish the flight, we'd like to finish with something sweet. This is the crown jewel of our country. We are in the eastern hills of Friuli, the most extreme area of the Colli Orientali, which is this crater that has a perfect exposure. The one the Julian Alps are protecting this area from the cold winds. On the other hand, the sea breeze have an easy access to the vineyards, like some air conditioning. Some time ago, talking to a Friulan producer, he said to me, you have to really work hard to make bad wine in the Colli Orientali. Are perfect, including that of the soil. Ponca, very hard, very raw soil. It resulted from the compression of the sand layers pressed down by the various geological ages, mixed with clay and lime. In the extreme tip of this area, there's a very small designation that is the Ramandolo. It's a DOCG of the Ramandolo wine. This corner of heaven hosts a winery by the name of Roncat at approximately 400 meters sea level. It's a winery that started was started in 1968, and it was initiated by Giovanni Dri. Seen from the outside, it's almost like a mountain cottage. There's nothing that speaks to luxury. It is, on the contrary, perfectly enshrined in this precious landscape. Now, Giovanni, Carla, and Stefania are now taking care of the vineyards and make the wine. They're in charge of communications and exports. So they've really inherited from every point of view the company business, the business. We're about is the Ramandolo. Ramandolo is a very special grape variety. It lends itself successfully to drying on mats. It is extremely sensitive, and it has a very special palette of warm colors. It's hard to cultivate. It requires cold weather as well as a lot of sunlight. So it requires nice exposure, fresh, cool air at the same time. The wine we're about to taste today is a sweet wine. The grapes is Verduzzo Milano. Verduzzo has always been planted in this area of Friuli. Verduzzo has the great ability to concentrate very easily the sugars. So the sugars will concentrate because of the drying, and at the same time, also when
tenere alto il
it's
livello.
overripe, it can keep the level of acidity pretty high. When we dry the verduzzo, we don't have to give up its acidity, and it yields sweet wines that are perfectly balanced by some proportion of freshness that really supports sweeter components. The grape pressed very, very softly. Fermentation takes place exclusively with indigenous yeast, and vinification is carried out in stainless steel. And the choice of processing these grapes in stainless steel is because they want to keep the key characteristics of such a delicate grape unaltered. Excuse me for interrupting you.
Collegamento ecco su Zoom.
So we have someone on Zoom, someone who will speak of the company. Hello. Good evening.
Buonasera da Ramandolo.
Che bello.
Good evening from Ramandolo. Can you hear me?
Aggiungo qualcosina a quello che
Volentieri.
Let me add a few words to what you said. I am Stefania Dri. I'm the daughter of Giovanni, the first producer perhaps in Ramandolo who believed in the interest of this wine and who started marketing it outside our region. The first important thing to mention is that Friuli Venezia Giulia has wines that bear the name of the grape. The only one that is named after the area is Ramandolo. It's named after the village, like the French wines. The area of Ramandolo, as you know, is close to Mount Nadia, and just beyond it you have the Alpine foothills, and so it's a different area in Friuli that also is apart from the rest of the Colli Orientali is part of, because the climate is continental, where the growth cycle is delayed, whereby the growth cycle is delayed by 1 month. So here we are harvesting in October and not in September. So we have just started the harvest operation. This is very important. Friuli is known for its dry white wines, while Ramandolo is known for sweet wines and red wines. So we are a world apart. Ramandolo is in that the grapes are Verduzzo, the typical grape variety from Friuli. Color would make you think drying techniques and vinification techniques, but that is not the case. I think but actually Verduzzo is a grape variety that in itself is is closer to a red grape. There's no maceration, but the must initially has this color. This corresponds to a tannic component which is high in Verduzzo, on a par with red grapes. So that is the secret behind the Verduzzo and Ramandolo, because the tannic components are so pervasive that if the wine is made by completely fermenting to dry the alcohol, it will be a very coarse wine, very tannic, while with the sugar counterpart, this wine ends up being sweet, but not too sweet, which is the key characteristic of Ramandolo. We have several versions of this wine. This is one that is processed in stainless steel because it's the most typical. It's the one that really has the idea of the place. And what we said before, there's no drying here. It's more of a late harvest, a natural late harvest that comes naturally because of the characteristics of the place. There are other versions where it's dried, but in this drying. What's possible is that initially you will detect the sweetness, the gentle part, and then the tannins will take over. So this wine can be tasted at any time. It's a wine for conviviality, for spending time together, and not just at the end of a meal with the desserts, but it works well with many different pairings. Sweet wines are often selected, but remember that the landscape of sweet wines is very diverse, as you can use sweet wines in many different ways, and always remember that sweet wines also sweeten life, make life sweeter. Thank you very much, Fania. Thank you.
Bene, ora chiudiamo in dolcezza perché mi sembra il minimo.
So we're going to a sweet note. The color is very special. It's a copper, deep copper color. I have already flared the wine, and sweet, which is not sweet, is already present in the bouquet because you have fruit, apricots, and dates, but actually a whole set of mineral nuances, mineral hints that support the bouquet. We have fine sensations, brackish sensations, and ferrous sensations as well, in a way. Some honey that tells a lot about the sweetness of the wine, and at the same time you have some roots like licorice and gentian together. There's a floral sensation of chamomile, dried chamomile, some tobacco, and very nice spice between saffron, ginger, and turmeric. And then it finishes with some very special notes. And here I would even refer to hydrocarbons, the sensation of rubber and gasoline that clears this very elegant nose. Let's taste it.
Sentite l'equilibrio.
You can detect the balance. Sweetness is there, a tangible residual sugar. There's this very slight tannic line that manages the sweetness. Acidity is very present with these sensations of almost orange peel, and retronasal range, it opens like a pig's tail. In retrofaction, on top of all the flavors that we detected on the nose as well, we get nuts, hazelnut, almonds, almost roasted. And then the licorice is back, and then a very nice balsamic note. The sugar is there, but it's not overpowering. This is a wine that necessarily goes on desserts with cookies or apricot custards. This goes well with cheeses, blue cheeses, cheeses, aged cheeses. This is sugar that works well on, not on more sugar, but something that is particularly salty. I would try it with foie gras. I would give it a try to see what happens, but I think that on cheese it would be the best pairing. It's a pleasure to close this tasting on a sweet note. This was a very nice journey across Italy. I would like to thank the producers in attendance and also those who joined us from a remote location. Okay, sorry, I'll take the microphone back. I'm really enchanted, and I'm here to say that Italy has conquered, for instance, the United States. We've just closed a deal with 66 brand, and so I'm making the American dream with Sarah and everybody here. So Pinot Nero is on Route 66, is traveling on Route 66. Thank you and enjoy. Pinot Nero is a traveling varietal, and that's a very nice close for this evening. Thank you very much for attending. Ma se potete andare un po' più veloce, così. Ma giusto per farmi, fatisco a respirare. Allora